So good evening, everyone, on this at least chilly evening in the Northeast. We are delighted to welcome everyone back who was here with us before, and to welcome everyone who's newly joining our circle of emerging elders, those of us desiring to elder in grace. And we hope that these circles, these monthly circles that will happen every first Monday of the month, will be enriching and supportive and empowering and inspiring for all of us. Certainly our first circle was. So this evening we are continuing in the spirit in which we began, with a special, I guess we could say, with a special invocation to the spirit of Thomas Berry, who has inspired so much of what we do at the Degnan Institute for Earth and Spirit, and particularly in this circle, which overlaps the Berry Forum and the new we that Danny and Carlos are inaugurating, and they'll tell us about that, I'm sure, as we come on. But this evening, in True Berryan Spirit, we are going to explore the importance, the summons to be transmitters of story, of stories of wisdom, of stories of healing and liberation, and to ground all of that in the great story. So let me invite Danny, who will animate and facilitate our gathering as he will every month. Danny, thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. Gracious as always. Good to be with you, and happy to be with everyone here again as we explore what we're calling eldering in grace. I think the title speaks for itself, though we will elaborate as we go. But let me begin with a thought on how we're doing this, just for a moment. In a sense, we're crowdsourcing wisdom, which means that we're all doing this work that Kathleen just described together. This is not a program where you simply listen and receive, but a process in which we will all try to generate something together. And there'll be a number of ways for you, for us, to do this that clearly include sharing in the breakout rooms, but other things too. For example, we'll be asking you to share your thoughts immediately after we finish this evening. And it is not simply feedback that we're asking for. Rather, it's your input into a new story, a new creation. We've also created a YouTube channel where we'll have a recording of our sessions. And by the way, the session is being recorded. If you have any issues with that, I beg your forbearance. And if you can't, for any reason, it won't be used for commercial reasons or purposes. But we've created a YouTube channel where we will store these recordings, but also we'll create a kind of a podcast where I will offer either a reflection on or a distillation of the previous session, or an interview with someone who's working in the field of eldering. For example, there's Jerome Kerner, I see, who's working with a movement called From Aging to Saging. That's been going for the last 30 years. So there will be things like that we will do, all ways for us to participate in and contribute to this important exploration of eldering in grace. But let me turn to today's theme, which I'm calling meaning and purpose. In our first mindfulness dialogue, we distinguished between aging as a given, to be endured, and eldering as the learning gleaned from this given. Over the coming dialogues, we want to see what this learning entails by exploring themes like acceptance and suffering, but also discovering and contributing, that are all part of an integration process. For you might recall, we noted that the psychologist Erik Erikson described this later stage of life as integration versus despair. And it seems to me then that a framework of meaning and purpose would be critical to enable us to do this. A framework of meaning would take the form of a story of origins, what some, like Thomas Berry, call a functional cosmology that describes the world we share, and that would then point to a purpose for us humans in this world. In the past, elders were seen as the keepers of wisdom and the tellers of the story that is at its foundation. So perhaps this is a good place to start our work as elders in training. Because I said at one stage that aging is a given. Eldering really is about choosing in a particular way. So in a sense, everything has a purpose within a story of origins. Galaxies create stars, which provide the material, stardust, literally, for planets like ours. Oceans are the foundations of a cycle that nurtures life in all its forms. Plants and living creatures, including us humans, interact with each other in order to maintain the conditions for the emergence of life on Earth. Everything has a purpose within the framework of an unfolding universe, which is essentially to participate in its own unique way in the emergence of life. In human beings, this life emerges into a form of self-reflective consciousness. The universe, in other words, becomes itself through all the forms it evolves into. In us humans, it becomes conscious of itself. Through my eyes, the stars look back on themselves in wonder. The poet Rilke, you'll find out as we go that Rilke is a favorite poet of mine, has a wonderful way of describing this process, this unfolding process. He says, I live my life in ever-widening circles. Let me see if I can find the poem. I think I put it up on the screen here.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can get this stuff out of the way. There we are. I live my life in ever-widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I circle around God, around the ancient tower. I've been circling for thousands of years, and still I do not know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a continuing great song? And still I do not know. But who or what is the I that Rilke refers to? As with all true poetry, the poet gives voice to the deeper self that we all share as expressions of the life that some call God and others source or energy or even consciousness. As I suggested, this takes the form of a self-reflective consciousness in us humans, but we'll come back to what that might mean a little later. First of all, let's focus on the ever-widening circles that are helpful images of the evolutionary process itself.
Mm-hmm.
They might also refer to an expanding awareness in any of us, I suppose. The two are certainly related in the sense that life is evolving through ever-increasing complexification that leads or has led so far to self-reflective consciousness. At the same time, this complexification happens in individual human beings in the form of awakening, or what some call enlightenment. Many of our traditions over the centuries point to this as our goal, even if it is never realized fully in this life. As Rilke notes in the poem, I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. In the second stanza, though he is clearly speaking of a larger unfolding that includes us humans, but also everything that ever has been or will be. For this I, has been circling for thousands of years, he says, as an unfolding of the source that he calls God. But then he adds perhaps an acknowledgement of the many attempts over the years to define this God. I circle around the ancient tower. This time, however, the human aspect is not presented as the centerpiece, and certainly not the end point, for still I do not know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a continuing great song? Rilke's words stir memories in me of times when I felt myself to be one with this unfolding world in a very palpable way, an expanded I feel like. I remember as a boy, I would climb Black Mountain, which was really nothing more than a hill behind our house in the outskirts of Belfast. And I would lie in the heather listening to the skylarks, sensing the animals all around me, and feeling that I belonged here, that this was my home as much as the house I shared with my family. I also remember a movie back then in which a young boy, I think it was called Gregory's Girl, but a young boy is trying to impress his girlfriend, and he gets her to lie in the grass and then tells her to hold on tight because, as he proclaims, we are spinning at 1,000 miles an hour. Referring, of course, to the earth spinning, but implying that this involves all of us. Whatever about his science, it was a good tactic for impressing a girlfriend. But even in these simple memories, we can get a sense of the universe story, which the writer Thomas Merton calls the cosmic dance, which beats in our very blood, whether we want it to or not. And perhaps herein lies the root cause of our present crises. We no longer feel that we belong to the earth or the universe. Our ancestors all around the world, according to the finding of anthropologists, had a deeper sense that they were part of something more than their simple day-to-day tasks. They saw themselves as participating in a world of gods and spirits, of dreams and songs. The Australian Aboriginal peoples told the story of ancestor gods who sang the dream of life into existence in the form of mountains and rivers and trees and animals. And when we humans could hear these songs of the earth, it meant we were in harmony. We belonged and we knew how to behave. But when we didn't hear the songs, chaos resulted from our separation from this great family. Today, we don't hear the songs of the earth so well, and the lack of balance that this loss of belonging brings creates confusion and chaos for us. So let's begin our interaction. The way we've been doing this is following a mindfulness dialogue, simple process of connecting, exploring the theme, and discovering what is emerging out of our interaction. I will try to seed the field a little bit with a reflection like this in a poem or so. And now I'm going to invite you into a mindfulness meditation that reflects this first piece of connecting to an unfolding universe that we actually belong to. This is the largest of frameworks for understanding our human world that will enable us then to discover what this might mean for the eldering stage of our lives, both individually and collectively. So position yourself. Let me invite you into a mindfulness exercise now. Position yourself comfortably, relaxed but alert, your back straight, your hands in your lap, your eyes closed or softened to help you go within to a deeper place. And take 3 deep breaths. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Now breathe normally. In your mind, softly say the words, I live my life in ever-widening circles. Repeat that to yourself like a mantra a couple of times. I live my life in ever-widening circles. Now visualize a light surrounding you as you slowly rise through the clouds and into the sky from where you can see the earth below. Feel the calmness and freedom of seeing the planet in this way. Feel the planets and stars that stretch out around you in all directions. Now imagine yourself to be stardust in the midst of this vastness. And feel yourself cooling to become a planet that becomes oceans and mountains where plants and animals emerge. And humans who form communities that discover and learn, who make music and invent amazing things. And feel yourself as your ancestors, your parents, yourself, and your descendants. Hold this expanded self. Feel all these as part of you. The stars, the planets, the ocean, the mountains, the humans, our ancestors, our children. And say quietly, this is my story. This is our story. This is who I am. This is who we are. Stay with this for a few moments longer. And now return to this moment, to your body. And when you're ready, if your eyes were closed, open your eyes. Just notice for a moment the sense of connection to all the things that surround you, to one another. And I'm going to invite Carlos now. You'll meet Carlos a little bit later on to break us into pairs, breakout rooms. He's been trying to work behind the scenes to assign so that everyone makes sure that they're in a breakout room, and simply share what this stirred in you. You have the poem there. I live my life in ever-widening circles. I circle around God. I've been circling for thousands of years. What does it say? Perhaps even a personal story like mine lying in the heather might surface for you. There's no right or wrong. Just you're going to give yourself a few minutes each to talk about that, to share about that, and we'll call you back. So Carlos, if you could bring people into pairs. This is where the work of eldering really happens, I think. So we were experimenting last time with hearing what we were calling a representative voice. Clearly, if we heard from every group or every pair, we would be here for the rest of the evening. So it's a matter of entrusting ourselves to an emerging we that we're generating together. And so listen to your own heart. You don't have to speak on behalf of your partner in the dyad or in the pairs, but just speak to what you shared or what's moving in you. And we'll hear from the north, the south, the east, and the west, just symbolic as a representative group of us. If you don't speak, entrust yourself to the representative voice that's emerging. So maybe the simplest way then is put up your hand, either literally, or there's a little sort of thing called reactions down in there. You can. So go ahead, Mickey.
It was a wonderful experience. My breakout room partner was in his 40s. He just turned 40. And I just turned 93. So it was wonderful because we had an amazing amount in common, and we certainly did have some different perspectives. But it helped me to remember not to just assume that wisdom and eldering, quote unquote, isn't just done by old people. And the fact that this young person wanted to join us, wanted to join this group, and wanted to learn from it and to participate in it, helped to expand my experience of being connected to everybody as well as everything, and not just to the people who were like me in experience and so on and so on. So I found it very wonderful. Thank you.
That's great, Mickey. And obviously, like an emerging representative voice is often surprising. So thank
Indeed.
you. Nice.
Indeed.
So let's hear from another representative, Catherine.
I don't think I can give you something profound. What I can say was that I was coupled with Lisa, and what we did first was to exchange our own stories. Because without knowing the story of the person you're talking to, how could you possibly see a broader understanding, as you asked for, Danny, in relation to circling the universe or coming up with who we are in this world? And so I just want to say that it was, and I have Lisa's permission to speak for her too, was to say that how important it was to just share your stories and share the commonalities and also the differences, and to touch briefly on, in her case, how important this cosmology and the environment and being involved with Catherine and her group. And for me, to recognize a time in which I felt very small when I was in one of the great parks arches and realized that I was not the most important person in the world. So that was my recognition of the circling. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. So rich. Pamela.
Yeah, so the sharing with the person I was with was, we were on the same wavelength in a number of the subjects, which was very interesting. And I think it gave, I can't speak for him, but for myself, it gave me a good feeling to know that there was another that had the same interests and was doing the circling. I also was a member from the very beginning. So thank you, Jerome, for saying 30 years. I didn't know how long it was, but I was one of the first people in from aging to saging. I worked with Rabbi Zellman, and it was a wonderful experience. But as I was telling my partner, I didn't feel like I was ready to be a sage. So I did it for a while, a couple of years, and then I started circling. The topic of aging to saging is an incredible topic that goes on. And I feel like I still don't know. I think what you put up, the reading was just perfect. And I'm happy to know that another young person is interested, as Muriel said, interested in the saging part. That's a wonderful thing to know. So
I can't help but remember Thomas Berry. He was elderly when I met him. He lived until he was well into his 90s. But people would ask him, "How old are you, Thomas?" And he would say, "I'm 13.8 billion years old." Like So one more voice from our collective. Raise your hand, as they said, literally, or go for it, Sue.
Okay, I always have to remember to take off the mute button. But I felt exactly the same way as others have described about just being right on the same path with my partner we were room 9, but I didn't ask his permission to say anything about us specifically, so I won't do that. But it was interesting to me, especially this poem, the Rilke poem about circling around the ancient tower for thousands of years. Both I had come from working with Danny for the past 30 some years on various projects, the first of which was to hold a global forum in Atlanta, Georgia in 1992, which turned out to be greatly successful, partly because he was there as the coordinator of our faith sector. And my partner, so I live now in Virginia where it feels like spring here, and he's in Vermont. And he lives not too far from where Thomas Berry was buried. And also, he's been a friend of Sister Kathleen's for many years, and whom I don't know. And so it was like we've been circling around, all of us, vibrating or resonating, whatever you want to call it, to this same, what Hildegard would call green energy. And here we are meeting like this in December of 2023. You know, the COP summit is going on. All these things are happening, and it's kind of like, I think Danny was saying something about I have to read my notes. The new revelations that keep, the awakening. Not only the awakening goes on, and the new revelations and the continuing enlightenment. I have that great sense of continuing enlightenment, and it's kind of like, who knows what's coming next. Anyway, it's great to be here with all of you.
And I think it's an appropriate maybe question to hold for a second. Who knows what's coming next? All of us feel that deeply in a particular way these days. The world is in such an unstable place, it feels. But just notice for a moment our sense of connection, even in this short time, coming together the way we have done. Listening to one another, a mindfulness meditation, breaking into pairs. And here we are. There is that sense that it is possible to create that foundation. And in doing so, in the context of mindfulness dialogue, it's like creating, we call a container where something new can happen, where differences, in fact, can be held and worked across and worked with, and not simply lead to conflict the way, unfortunately, they do so often. But just to notice that as we bring that energy of connection that we have with ourselves, with this moment, with one another, and probably with so much more, hopefully through the meditation. People in the past, animals, the whole world, the whole universe out of which we have come. This I. So let's step into what they call in mindfulness dialogue the exploring stage. We're going to look at this theme of meaning and purpose just a little bit more. And at the end of it, I'll offer you a poem as a form of a catalyst to inspire. Okay, well, what does it mean? What are we talking about here when we talk about meaning and purpose of human life? What contribution? Thomas Berry used to say, what are humans for? Simple little question. What are humans for? You never ask yourself that question, I suppose. Clearly, we play a role in this big story, but we're not alone. Nor is the purpose of the universe fully realized in us humans, I don't believe, which is what the attitudes of our modern culture, and I might add our religions, seem to imply. Rilke's framework simply describes the mystery we all share in ever-widening circles of an unfolding universe, an ever-evolving life, a continuing great song. But why is the story of origin so important? Clearly, to have a vision of what's happening and how we're part of it gives fundamental meaning and purpose to our lives. It's this story that helps us make sense of things, even, perhaps especially, when we're facing challenges. It is what gets us up in the morning to face into another day when all we feel like is turning over. So to be without a story, or as is the case with us, to have a story that no longer feels adequate, is an essential challenge that has to be addressed first if we are to make any sense of this stage of eldering. I think there are two aspects of this challenge. One is finding or creating a new story. The other is applying it to our lives. The first challenge begins with the realization that we don't actually have an adequate story. We sometimes act as if we do around Christmas or Hanukkah or Eid al-Fitr, for example. And these celebrations certainly do serve a purpose, albeit limited, like reinforcing family bonds or reminding us to be kind. I don't mean to trivialize those, but in terms of like the majority of the world's people, those stories that are reflected in Christmas or Hanukkah are inadequate in the way that they stand. So where do we begin the work of finding an adequate story, a functional cosmology, as Berry calls it? Certainly, we now have the empirical data as never before in the scientific discoveries about the universe that our children are increasingly aware of and that provide the basic elements for a new story of origins. And this scientific story is clearly influencing the traditional storytellers of our cultures, the poets and artists of all forms, as they plumb the depths of human experience on our behalf. But we also have the technical and technological capacity to come together across all our differences as never before. Carlos will speak to that a little bit towards the end. We can discover together then, discover the great story that has shaped all our lives from the beginning. Our gathering is an example of what Thomas Berry calls the great work of our time, which is to tell a new story and redefine our lives accordingly. Creating this new story together, in fact, is already the primary way we begin to apply this emerging framework to our lives, which have also been transformed by the changes that are affecting us, that are impacting us today. For to share our different stories, as Catherine was saying, of life, our own stories in today's new world and its new challenges will not only enable us to discover together a new shared global story, but also to connect in ways that inspire and support deeper mutual understanding. And we could surely do with that. This connection and deeper mutual understanding will guide our efforts to apply the new story to our many interactions at every level. The articulation of earth principles, for example, the development of appropriate government, the nurturing of creative international relations, along with the redefining of all our institutions like healthcare and education. I would go so far as to say that this new story application process will also have important implications for spirituality and religion. Certainly, spirituality as the cultivation of the deeper dimensions of what we might call soul or spirit has already been impacted. The convergence of breathing as a stress reduction technique and the practice of mindfulness is just one example. But a new story will necessarily impact the basic elements of religion too, in all its traditional forms, from its cosmology or creation story to the ritual celebration of fundamental moments, both individual and collective, and from principles for living, morality, to guidance and advocacy. One final comment, or rather question, that might shape our breakout room conversations now concerns what all this says about the purpose and role of human beings in the great scheme of things. Where do we fit in the great story? What do we contribute? We've already answered this at least partly when we declared that we humans are the storytellers of the universe. Well, two references spring to mind. One is Adam giving names to all the animals in the Garden of Creation. The other is a piece from the poet Rilke, again, his 9th Duino elegy, as it's called. And his piece seems to build on Adam's contribution. This is how he describes our purpose. It's somewhat poetic, but it's so real. Perhaps we are here in order to say house, bridge, fountain, gate, pitcher, fruit tree, window, but to say them, you must understand, oh, to say them more intensely than the things themselves ever dreamed of existing. Isn't the secret intent of this taciturn earth, when it forces lovers together, that inside their boundless emotion, all things may shudder with joy? That inside their boundless emotion, all things may shudder with joy. I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that the scientific story sees humans as the universe evolved into self-reflective consciousness. In other words, we are the voice of the universe, and so our work is to name, to say their names, as Rilke puts it, even more intensely than the things themselves ever dreamed of existing. You can get a sense of what he means. Perhaps then our question in our small groups might be, how can we serve as the voice of the universe? What do you think Rilke means when he says we should name the things of the world even more intensely than they themselves ever dreamed of existing? So let me invite Carlos to break us into our groups again and take this piece here, maybe by Rilke, or whatever it is that stirs in you. The basic question is, what are humans for? What do you think? It's certainly a way of framing what we're about. We'll come back maybe next session to look at what's my unique contribution in all of this, but what is going on has always been the question that has intrigued me. So Carlos, again into pairs, give yourself a few minutes each. What are humans for? What are we here for? What is the purpose as a way of framing our work as elders? I will call you back in about 7 or 8 minutes so that we can share what comes up. We were just saying it's usually the best part of these gatherings is the breakout rooms, of course. That's where the real action happens. So
It was wonderful. It was wonderful.
Good. So let's hear. And if you spoke already, maybe just hold back a little bit in case there's other voices. So if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand. Go for it, Jack.
I spoke with my partner in this breakout room was Lisa Shebley, and we spoke about stories, and we started telling ours a little bit, and we found out that we were basically, I grew up in the same area that she lives in right now. So that was pretty interesting. And we were both teachers. She was in the arts. I started out studying art. Very much many things in common, and she has gone into spirituality, religion, and a variety of things that kind of connect everything. But the upshot of that, both breakout sessions, I was with Marjorie the other time, the first time, and stories, exchanging stories and connecting, which leads me to another person who brought me here, of Jean Clark, who is also on this call, about being a communing, a communion of subjects as opposed to a collection of objects. And as a language teacher, a communion of subjects is active. A collection of objects is static, to be used. So that in a very practical sense means that we need to connect. And that's what it's about.
And that is what it's about too. Thank you, Jackie. Another. Rob.
Well, I could say that it was very inconclusive. That I would, if I can summarize, my partner felt that the purpose of being human was to save the world from humanity. That might not be exactly the way he would put it. I was saying that the purpose of being human is to glorify God. And I don't really know what glorify means, and I don't really know what God means. So we didn't really, we this laid the groundwork for a very long discussion. That's about what we got to.
Thank you, Rob, though it's very real and very vulnerable too, because I think all of us resonate with exactly that too. Another, from another part. Kathleen.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, if Narayan isn't going to talk about the lovely discovery we had in our circle, I will, but he can jump in. You know, we're talking about these widening circles. So we come into this group and find out that our fathers are born in the same town in Ireland, in Leitrim. Almost, it's just so, oh, I don't know. I always think of Ireland as a fairy ring, you know, as a circle in which little miracles happen, marvelous things happen, unexpected things happen. That's always been my experience of it. And I just feel that that happened tonight. And I hope to get to know probably someone who's my cousin a bit better, even post this conversation. It was a joy.
There's it. The sharing of those stories too that make those connections. It's like discovering yourself in another. One more came out of that. Go ahead, Jean.
Well, when I was speaking about why the human and what is our purpose, I thought about that language and symbols that can communicate and live on is a big part of the human. The example I used was I kind of dedicated my life a lot to nonviolence, and I don't know that I could have done that without Jesus and Gandhi and Martin Luther King, because their words and the putting it into language continues and evolves with other people. And I think that's a big part of what a human does, what humans are meant to do. And so how important it is for us to speak our word so that others can hear. And because that language creates so much creativity, imagination, you know. So that's what I thought about what being human meant.
That's beautiful, Jean. That's beautiful. Yeah. Jerome, you want to say something? Sorry.
I just want to add, because I was with Jean and Catherine, and I think that in addition to language, one of the big differences that we can attribute perhaps is the fact that we have articulating thumbs and we use tools, and it led us to cultivation, which created community. I think as nomads, we perhaps had less use of language except to point out where the next prey was. Whereas in community, as we began to farm and create villages and so forth, there were many more issues that we had to deal with, and ways of resolving them, perhaps with some kind of language. So I think our purpose is to create community, but I think we went astray when we overbuilt our communities, and we began not to know each other in those communities. And I think if we look at tribal communities where they limit their numbers to those that they can relate to, and the concept takes a village to raise a child, well, there's some substance to that we've lost along the way.
I think that's a helpful segue too. You know, there's something that we've lost along the way would imply that we do know intuitively, perhaps we glimpsed in our earlier stages of evolution what it meant. Maybe agriculture and technology, certainly the downside, some would argue, has dulled that in us and has fostered the illusion of what Lewis Mumford, the philosopher, scientist, called the illusion of limited control, was how he described Western culture in particular. I mean, you lose a sense of wonder. I think you lose perhaps what it is that constitutes a human being. At least that's what I'm beginning to hear us say. And maybe that's what glorifying might mean. Glorifying the source of this. I just finished watching Life on Our Planet on Netflix. It's narrated by Morgan Freeman. And it's the 4.5 billion years of life on Earth. And of course, life has been extinguished. It would have seemed many times. There have been 5 major extinctions throughout that process, and yet it would surface. But it was very humbling to see our ancestors. This is where we came from, all of them. We're not separate. We didn't come into the world, as somebody said, or the way we would even tend to describe our being born, coming into the world. We come out of the world. We come out of this amazing unfolding reality, and we have brought it to an impasse a number of times in our various forms. And who knows where we are right now. It's certainly an enormous challenge. But let me try to draw this enormous issue together with a statement from Thomas Merton, many of you are familiar with. He was a big influence on my youth and on the lives of many of us who have searched seriously, I think, for direction in a changing world. This is what he writes, and many of you are familiar with Thomas Merton. Especially our friend Kathleen had put together a wonderful book of prayers of hours. She called it a book of hours of Thomas Merton. For the world and time are the dance of God in emptiness. The silence of the spheres is the music of a wedding feast. The more we persist in misunderstanding the phenomena of life, the more we analyze them into strange finalities of our own, the more we involve ourselves in sadness, absurdity, and despair. But I love this piece. But it does not matter much, because no despair of ours can alter the reality of things or stain the joy of the cosmic dance, which is always there. Indeed, we are in the midst of it, for it beats in our very blood, whether we want it to or not. Yet a fact remains: we are invited to forget ourselves on purpose. Wow. Cast our awful solemnity to the winds and join in the general dance. I'm reminded that Anne and I had that read at our wedding 30 years ago. It still holds. So let the words, yet a fact remains that we are invited to forget ourselves on purpose, cast our awful solemnity to the winds and join in the general dance. Let's pause for a moment in a mindfulness meditation in order to listen for what we're beginning to hear ourselves say, what we hear emerging this evening about eldering in grace. So take a pause. Let me invite you to close your eyes if it helps, or soften your gaze. Just take 3 deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just breathe normally. Hold gently onto your breath. Let it hold you in this moment as you listen for what you hear us. What is emerging out of us do you hear? It may be your words, maybe your own thoughts, but it may be something you heard from another in a small group or in the larger group, about meaning and purpose as the foundation for our eldering embrace. The story of our story, our participation, our contribution to this story. And when you're ready, if you can feel something moving in you, and there's no right or wrong. In fact, if you think it's foolish, it's all the more reason to speak it, because it probably is not contrived or from your ego, but just coming out. So why don't you see if you can risk a little vulnerability and speak from your heart? And we'll hear from 4 voices again. So just speak if you're moved. Raise your hand so we can see. Go ahead, Marjorie.
Well, I was reading something recently that was talking about all that our hearts go through in our lives, and how our lives and what happens to us shapes our hearts. And our hearts become like the landscape, like the very ground that we walk around on. We are the landscape of heart on the planet. And I just find that as we are in these eldering years, that what we do is not so much important as what we are. And it just comes in stronger and stronger. And when I go off track and I start thinking, oh, I have to do something, or I have to accomplish this, or this needs to be, when I go backwards instead of deeper into being what life actually is presenting to me, it's always a lesson. So that's where all of this goes to. Our stories add up deeply to this landscape of the heart, and we're all a precious piece.
This landscape of the heart. That's beautiful, Marjorie. Thank you. Doug.
I'm sorry, I don't want to take up space. I'm a younger generation here, but I feel just moved to say, in the conversations I've been a part of with you all, and reflecting on wisdom, and the wisdom of experience and time that you all are sharing and have and provide to the world. And as a younger person, I cherish that, and I thank you. And I think about part of how that wisdom is relational, and it's not something just for the individual to hold on to and keep, and that that this sharing is so necessary and important for people like me and my generation and younger to hear. And it affirms the importance, I think, of intergenerational community and the necessity of that, and how this society has kind of dislocated the generations, and so we've missed out on that wisdom, and we don't learn from y'all's lessons that you've gathered and gained over these years. we don't learn about them in our younger years. And so we go through so long of, finding our own way maybe, but like, we also might not live in a good way with the earth and with the land and with other people because we don't hear that wisdom from you all enough because of these separations that are systematic. But anyway, I'm just saying this because I want to thank you, each of you, for being here. I want to thank Danny for his continued leadership and guidance and mentorship. I hope that more young people can be a part of these conversations to listen and bear witness to the wisdom and pass that along to the world and to others.
Thank you so much, Doug. And we leave it to you also to bring in, because it's so delightful for us to have younger ears as well as younger voices. Because eldering, I don't think, is confined to, as we said, aging. Another voice just to bring ourselves together. Bonnie.
We are each a vibration in the great pond of life, like the stone that's dropped in the middle of the water. Each of us making a ring, a vibration, an energy that comes through our ancestors, comes through the people we are today, the people who touch us all along the journey. And we evolve as we learn and grow with one another in that vibration of life.
That's so good. So beautiful, Bonnie. Thank you so much. The last voice. Well, perhaps just a way of pulling it together. Rilke's, I live my life in ever-widening circles. Perhaps the I or the we that Rilke refers to is the logos or the Christ that has been emerging from the beginning through all the stages of the earth's evolution, through all the birthings that's reflected at this time of the year at Christmas. And perhaps this I will emerge as a new species in the future. Perhaps the way it has always done, out of our suffering and death, because this is the way of life too. These are things that we do have to explore as elders, as realistic elders too, as we step down that road towards our own mortality and our own participation in a different way in this amazing mystery. Carlos and I mentioned, have been working on a project we call a new global we. I'm going to invite Carlos to say just a word or two about it, because it merges very clearly with what we're doing. We're inviting one another to articulate, to give voice, to tell this story, the emerging story of this new global we. Carlos, would you say a few words and maybe also add that we want the contribution, as I said at the beginning, we're crowdsourcing wisdom here in order to build this global we.
Thank you, Danny. I just want to say that I've had the privilege of working with Danny for several years, and the work has been about how to help groups, communities really tell their story, tell their individual story, and learn from each other and create a collective story. That's really been the work. And recently, we've been imagining how to expand that to a whole different level. That's come about by, you'll hear this hopefully with some reception, with the advent of AI. Danny and I believe has created a new moment in maybe global history that has never been possible before. So imagine creating these kinds of communities that we're creating here at the human level, but expanding it to be something that we can do it at the scale of 1,000, at the scale of 1,000,000, where 1,000,000 people are telling the story, where each individual contributor is part of it, is absolutely necessary to tell the fullness of the story. And that is only, we believe that we're actually living through a time on Earth where this might be possible for the first time. So imagine a room like this where we're meeting together in Zoom. And we know how deadly that can be when we start sort of glazing, our eyes start glazing and we start becoming very passive. But imagine if we start having dialogues like we're having now, but along with the dyads that we break into, along with in the breakout rooms, along with each of us, we can be accompanied by an AI. AI being an intelligence that really witnesses the wholeness of the dialogue and can hold it and can in real time summarize it, can feed back what we're saying with each other, for each other, to each other. And that's all that it's doing. It's really facilitating our grand story by bringing it together and holding it. And so if you don't contribute, if you don't go into the breakout rooms, if you don't say what you have to say, your piece will be missing from the great story. And we're talking about creating a new global story together. And that's kind of what we're experimenting with. We're looking at how we can use this amazing technology to really help us sort of move beyond what we have been able to do until now. I just want to share real quick our this is our YouTube channel that we are creating, and we hope that you will be part of it. You are part of it. We're putting up our YouTube videos from every week, and we invite people to continue this conversation over time in between the gatherings, both by continuing the conversation offline in comments and by kind of reflecting on what we've been doing together and continuing to expand this circle of the new global we. I guess that's all I'll say, Danny.
And Carlos, will you be able to give us the address or the links for that?
Yes.
There
Right.
it is. contact@anewglobalwe.com is where we want you to write your comments now while it's still fresh in your heart. If you would just take a few moments after Kathleen closes us out to write anything, maybe something you said, maybe something you heard. It doesn't have to be like a thought, a wise thought, just something that has come up, and send it to that. We're gathering these. They're all part of trying to surface a new we and the wisdom of a new we. The actual website is anewglobalwe.com, www.anewglobalwe.com.
And is all of that in the chat for us to capture?
Is it on the screen in front of you now?
I
Yeah.
don't see it on mine. I'm sorry.
I'll just put it into the chat then, just to make sure. I think I can do that.
Cut and paste.
Cut and paste. Where are we?
You can stop sharing probably.
There we go. To the chat. And here we go. Did it go? I went to the meeting. There you go. contact@anewglobalwe.com. It's there. It's a bit small, but you get it.
So we want to hear from you. We really want to hear from you. Not any kind of feedback about how today went, but really insight into what's emerging for you. And we'll pull this all together with the help of AI. And we'll continue to expand our story together that we're all telling. And we need your voices. So we want to hear from you afterwards.
So over to Kathleen to close this out. We're just running just a little bit late, but not too much. Kathleen, are you muted, I think?
No, I'm just I'm full, and searching or researching the proper word to close us out and send us forth. I think it brings us back. The word I would have us go back to is the inspiration of Rilke this evening, asking us if we are the falcon, the tower, or this endless song, and allowing whatever it is that is continuing to resonate within each of our hearts to carry us forward toward the next gathering that we have, and allow it to continue to inspire us and to wisen us as we are seeking this wisdom and this grace of eldering. And to thank Carlos and Danny for guiding us in this evening. Danny, thank you for your inspiration and for the gift of your poetry, even as you bring other poets before us. It's your own poetry that is enriching us so much. So thank each and every one of you, and we'll see you all next month on the first Monday. Please look forward to the invitation that will be coming your way.
And an e-blast will go out, probably reminding you that the recording is up on the YouTube, and maybe another e-blast will tell you that there's an interview on a podcasty kind of thing, all a work in progress. So
A quick note, the first Monday is January 1st, is New Year's Day.
That's
That could
right.
be a little awkward.
So we will finesse that somehow. We'll talk about it together and finesse it so that we don't lose a month.
Great.
all right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Kathleen, for hosting.
Everybody.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Bye.
you so
Bye.
much.